Just like old times.
Well, you're trying to bring back the first year. Where's the candles? Foot soldiers were knocked over and trodden underfoot. Even so, their mates shouted, "Go at them, Greys!" And again, "Scotland forever!" Some tried to grasp the stirrups and run with the horses to get in among the crumbling French formations. Soon the enemy were throwing down their weapons, crying for quarter. If you think this was an easy battle, think again. Napoleon's French troops were well trained, battle-hardened, well-resourced. Scenes like these offer details of the vast campus of Waterloo, clearly one of the most significant battles of European history. They help to fix an image of Scotland and Scotsmen that endured right through the 19th century and beyond. Indeed, it has not faded yet. The challenge to Scotland as a nation was not relieved by the victories of the Scottish soldiers. In fact, it became more intense, even as the British Empire was being created. Burns had already captured, in his poetry, the poverty and betrayal of the Scots by their lords and ladies. He saw clearly what many of his countrymen could not see, but only suffered. Burns reflected in many of his poems the hypocrisy and resentment of authority that had become endemic in society and culture. Just a few from his marvelous corpus of over 300 poems: Holy Willie's Prayer, The Twa Dogs, To a Louse, and that perfect poem, so far ahead of its time, When a Man's a Man. What though on hamely fare we dine, we're hot and grey and all that. Gie fools their silks and knaves their wine, a man's a man for all that. For all that and all that, their tinsel show and all that. The honest man, though e'er sae poor, is king of men for all that. Burns excelled at portraying not only the reality of the Scottish people's lives, but the universal condition of mankind, and presented an appeal for universal brotherhood that has remained steady ever since. That is why there are hundreds of Burns nights. Last count on the internet, there were over 600 Burns nights tonight in Canada and across the globe. Not just the English speaking. This is a busy time of the year for people who like haggis. What explains it? This little 2-bit nation, perhaps 5 million people, a nation of no great wealth, but a nation with influence far out of proportion to its size, that has bred some of the most outstanding leaders of the Western world. Robert Burns, of course, and followed by others of equally impressive biographies, or near equal. Adam Smith, Sir Walter Scott, Alexander Graham Bell, Robert Louis Stevenson, John Muir, the great American environmentalist, Robert Adam, the classical architect of supreme elegance, John Paul Jones, father of the American Navy, Tony Blair, recent British Prime Minister, just to name a few. Think about this. After Culloden came the clearances, a time of oppression and famine worse than the Highlanders had ever known, heaped on them by the landed aristocracy. People were evicted from the glens to make way for sheep. Some whole families were thrown out into the snow at the peak of winter. These were the cottars that Burns celebrated, now completely betrayed and abandoned because the sheep had the power of money, much like oil and gas does today. Does this not seem incredible? Yes, but it's true. At the beginning, the people accepted their new lot. They held on to the spirit of the clan, hoping to share in the glory of the chief when the bard sang or the piper played. Their attachment to the land was deep and strong, as deep and permanent as anything could be, because they came out of the earth and people that with talking stones and mystical warriors of mountain granite. Scottish culture was still virile and immediate. Yet strangely, they acknowledged the rights of the aristocracy to dispose of them at will. Even the church could not intervene. It was inevitable that this structure would collapse. And so the great migration of Scots to all parts of the world began. Many came here to America, settled in the mountains, not unlike their Highlands, and true to their heritage, became the fighting Scots of our history. They were the best of soldiers because they knew how to take orders, did not flinch in the face of calamity, and always fought with a sense of purpose or desperation. The women also shared this love of the land and fighting spirit. From the clan wars, there are brutal and pitiful accounts of women forced onto the battlefield. Here is a 5th century Celtic account. The work which the best of women had to do was to go to battle and battlefield, fighting and hosting, wounding and slaying. On one side of her she would carry her bag of provisions, on the other her babe, her wooden pole upon her back, and it had on one end an iron hook, which she would thrust into the tress of someone in the opposite battalion. Her husband behind her, carrying a fence stake in his hand and flogging her on to battle. The mother of the abbot of Holy Iona chanced on a day to come on a battlefield. Such was the thickness of the slaughter into which they came, that the soles of the woman would touch the neck of another. Though they beheld the battlefield, they saw nothing more touching or pitiful than the head of a woman in one place, and the body in another, and her little babe upon the breast of the corpse, a stream of milk upon one of its cheeks, and a stream of blood upon the other. I recite this to inform you for 2 reasons. This is not an account of heroism, but a reflection of Highland fighting values and myths going far back in centuries. This woman may have died before she was 15, but the spirit did not die. The Braveheart tradition, its harsh excesses as well as its glories, was being born. Now I depart briefly from this tale to another remarkably similar bedrock of devotion to the land and expression of fighting spirit. I submit that the American Indian, or as some prefer, Native American, was made from the same mold as the Scottish Highlander. The tribal social structure with chieftain authority was similar to the Scottish clans. There was savagery, but no worse than the European variety. In both tribal and clan culture, there was a strong sense of honor, loyalty, family responsibility, and focus on justice. After all, are these traits not God-given? The Indian had no concept of private property and could not understand how the land could be bought and sold. But again, is this not similar to the Cotter's idea that whatever else happened, the land would always be there for him? As the American West opened up, there was a serious ground of difference between the white man and the red man about land ownership and responsibility that triggered enormous tragedy. In other respects, I believe these men could have been brothers, as Burns also believed, and could have found ways to avoid the genocide and the great devastation of nature that marked the 19th century. A captivating Indian war story is about Private Clarence Spotted Wolf, a full-blood Dakota. He was born in 1914, entered the U.S. Army in 1942, and went overseas in August 1944. Private Spotted Wolf left written instructions with his tribe. If I should be killed and you have a memorial service, I want soldiers to go ahead with the American flag. I want cowboys to follow, all on horseback. Pardon me. I want one of the cowboys to lead the wildest of our horses, with saddle and bridle on. I will be riding that horse. He was killed December 21, 1944. On January 28, 1945, in North Dakota, a memorial service was held in his honor. The Stars and Stripes presided over the Winter Bear Hills where Clarence Spotted Wolf's family and friends carried out his wishes. There were soldiers, there were cowboys, and his own saddle was in place on the wild horse. Can you see him? Can you see them marching proudly across the glen? Hear the wind blow through the drifting snow. Tell me, can you see them, the ghosts of Culloden? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hodder. To give you a token of our appreciation.
Well, thank you so much.
Modern history of Celtic jewelry. Last year we gave you a piece of jewelry.
Yes.
This year we'll give you the history of it. An appreciation of your history lesson to us.
And my wife is still wearing that little piece of jewelry. Thank you folks so much.
Thank you.
Burns night would be complete without the toast to the lassies.